What's going on, guys? And thank you for tuning in to your favorite little soccer podcast on the internet at Stateside Footy. Man, man, oh man, oh man. I hope you guys are enjoying your weekend. I know I am, coming off the heels of a pretty incredible week as far as work goes. And I hope you guys had yourself a productive work week. But now it's time to kick back and relax and talk a little bit about soccer. And of course, we're going to be talking about the U.S. men's national team's lifeless performance in the CONCACAF Nations League. Before we get into it, hit your like and subscribe buttons. Also, the chat room was open today, too, if you guys want to talk U.S. men's national team. Particularly, I'm curious to know how you guys felt about this performance. Mainly, was there anybody that stood out to you as showing like they actually give a shit? The funny thing is, Landon Donovan, I think hit it right on the head, summed it up. Now, granted, I do acknowledge the fact that it was in the wake of a loss, and a pretty embarrassing loss to Canada. He summed it up like, listen, man, if you're not going to act like you give a shit, just decline the offer. And so, that's, it gets into that question. Okay, well, why didn't you decline the offer? Do you care? Well, obviously they care, or they wouldn't show up. Now that the dust has settled, and we are in the afterglow of what I consider one of the worst windows. It's one thing when it's a friendly. Yeah, you kind of, you take it a little bit more easier considering there's nothing really to play for. It's an opportunity just to fill a couple spots on the calendar, and it is what it is. You understand that maybe some of these guys are going through the motions, so maybe you call in, maybe you'll give first caps to a couple guys, and you'll fill in the gaps, especially if there's injuries. The last thing any of these guys want to do is jump on a plane for 16 hours, come across to the United States to play Venezuela in a friendly in Kansas City. I get that aspect, but this is not that. This is competitive matches in a tournament that the U.S. primarily dominates against teams that they have pretty much owned over the course of the last 5-6 years. A team that, there are no secrets between. I've heard everything in the aftermath that, that maybe Mauricio Pochettino doesn't understand CONCACAF. I highly disagree with that. I think he knows exactly what CONCACAF is about, even if he's never, even though that he's never played it or coached in it. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he's fully aware of what some of his other coaches in CONCACAF are going to try to do to the U.S. men's national team. I've heard that these players don't care. We can get into that. I'm sure there are levels, but I also acknowledge that it's a different era. And with a different era comes different priorities. And the days of Clint Dempsey, the days of Landon Donovan, the days of Eddie Pope, Carlos Bocanegra, Michael Bradley, those Josie Altidore, Charlie Davies, Stu Holden, those guys, those days are gone, man. It's a different era now. And this is also the same era that has seen more U.S. players playing Europe than ever before. And the money is phenomenally better than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So priorities have changed. That being said, let's start off against Panama because, listen, this shouldn't have, look, there was enough talent on the field to score 3 against Panama and make this a complete moot point. It didn't happen. Panama, they knew exactly what Panama was going to do. They're going to play in a 5-4-1, play 10 men behind the ball, give U.S. a bunch of possession, and essentially just challenge them to beat them. Now, I didn't necessarily like the double pivot of Tessman and Adams. I thought there could have been more of a high roaming presence from their 8, which should have been Weston McKinney, and you probably should have seen Diego Luna and Gio Reyna at that 10 position. Absence of Malik Tillman, who probably would have been here had he not been hurt. Generally speaking, when you know that your opponents are going to be playing with 10 men behind the ball, you want to have as many playmakers on the field as possible. And I'm sorry, and this is not any disrespect to Tanner Tessman. I like Tanner. But when you're playing, a double pivot and 2 CDMs and you only have one high roaming playmaker, and it's Weston McKinney, there's going to be reasons why you're going to have Christian Pulisic invert a little bit centrally to try to add a little more to that. But that being said, what did we end up seeing? We ended up seeing Weston McKinney hugging the touchline, Christian playing, centrally at the 10. And because of it, what happened? Panama collapsed on Christian. They literally had no answer centrally through the field, which means Josh Sargent wasn't going to get a tremendous amount of service. Now we can have the conversation, of what Mauricio Pochettino thought process behind this. I think he just assumed that there's going to be enough talent in order to get the job done. Now, granted, Josh Sargent rings one off the post, has one taken away. He buries one of those chances, and it's a completely different story. I think momentum swings, and the U.S. probably end up winning that match. As it turned out, those were really only the big chances that we had. Later on, Patrick Ashman comes into the ball game and has a couple opportunities there late, but of course it doesn't. It proves to be moot as the U.S. ends up falling to a Panama side that they easily should have beaten. I go back further to the preliminary roster because when I looked at it, it looked like Mauricio Pochettino really was selling out for a trophy. And I understand. Because the one thing that the U.S. men's national team needs right now is momentum. I mean, we're 400 and some odd days away from the World Cup. And this team is playing the B side to Mexico on home soil. Nobody's showing up for the U.S. men's national team. And, he's, and you make headlines by bringing in Mauricio Pochettino, who should. But that being said, this is where we're at. It's been a very tough year and change for this U.S. men's national team coming off a World Cup in 2022. And I think a lot of it has to do with maybe change perceptions of some of these players. I don't necessarily know if we're over, giving these players too much credit as far as their talent goes. I don't know about that. I mean, when I think about it, there's a reason why they're playing at some of the bigger clubs in the world. It's because they fought to get there. So that they possess the ability to fight for their positions just off that principle. But for whatever reason, they come to the national team and they act like their talent alone is going to be good enough to get over in CONCACAF. And mind you, there are going to be teams where that is possible. But then you're going to have teams like Mexico, Panama, Canada, potentially Costa Rica that are going to take it to them. And we saw that. The way that I look at this is funny, because I see this all the time with very big European national teams, like England, like France, like the Netherlands, Germany, Italy. When they're playing like Latvia, San Marino, Luxembourg, teams that are going to get blown off the pitch when they come into those international windows, you know that they're not going to be playing hard. They actually have that attitude of like, our talent is going to be good enough, and chances are pretty good we're going to be scoring 3, and this is going to be, an exhibition at its finest. That to me is how the U.S. men's national team acts. Like, they can just roll up on anybody and their talent's going to be good enough. Don't necessarily have to play hard. Can kind of waltz through it a little bit. And eventually, like, bing, bang, boom, somebody will score. U.S. men's national team wins. And it's not that. That's not how it works. Against Canada, you have your head coach going public saying that he's expecting a response. He wants to see how you're going to respond to adversity against a team that is going to be gunning from you, against a team whose coach is wanting to dunk on you, who is going to be bringing everything. And, they did. Canada, Canada loses their best player in Alphonso Davies. Jesse Marsh gets sent off with a red card, and it doesn't even faze them. As a matter of fact, they push harder, and the U.S. folds. And it just turns out that, Diego Luna, and of course this is a big Diego Luna channel, Diego Luna was felt like the only guy on the field that was actually playing hard, that was actually trying to find space, that was trying to create. I love the goal that that Ajman scored, coming off down the left from Timmy Weah, who played one in. Luna makes a nice cut in, and then just slips a nice little ball to Ajman. I actually didn't think the finish was really all that clinical. It just so happens with a better goalkeeper that ball is probably saved. No disrespect to St. Clair, but it is what it is. But a goal is a goal, and it counts. It counts. But were any of you guys convinced by Cameron Carter-Vickers? I like Mark McKenzie, but that's what happens when you're playing next to somebody who probably shouldn't be playing at that level. I hate to say it, when it comes to the center back pairing, the only guy that I have somewhat confidence is Tim Ream. At least he's steady with the ball at his feet. I mean, this is where we're at. We're generally like a little over a year away from 2026, and we still have more questions than answers. Still absolutely no confidence. And a core of guys who literally just feel like they can just show up and win on talent alone without giving that much effort. It actually kind of makes me mad a little bit when I think about it. Not to get too emotional over it, but when I think about the U.S. men's national teams of the past, the different versions of the national team, most of those guys had to fight for everything in their career. Those that were lucky to go to Europe had to continue, kept on proving. It wasn't automatic. Most of these guys generally went the college route to get playing time, played in MLS for a little bit before ultimately going over. And then once they went over there, they were looked at as second-class citizens because they were American soccer players, so they had to fight and scratch to get into the first team, fight and scratch to stay in the first team, and then fight some more just to get a starting spot. And even then, once they got that starting spot, if they didn't keep up that work rate, if they didn't keep up that drive, they were going to get replaced. And so when it came to the national team, with all the preconceived notions that Americans can't play soccer, when they put on the red, white, and blue, they were out to prove a point. When you come and play the U.S., you are going to have to earn everything because we're not going to give you much. Now, tactically, were they the best? No. Talent wise, were they the best? No. But they played hard. And they weren't going to fold. And then over the years, they started developing better talent. I remember when Landon first came into the squad and everybody realized what kind of talent he was going to be. And then the team was built around him, and we had some pretty decent results throughout that decade of the 2000s. When Christian Pulisic first came up, everybody kind of understood his talent. But when he established himself, and when the team was built around him, you saw this team actually play pretty well. You saw the hunger and drive in this team. Christian was playing a little bit of hero ball there, but the team was built around him. And quite honestly, I still think this team needs to still be built around Christian Pulisic. I don't like the fact that, Mauricio Pochettino sees him as a 10. Dude's world-class on the wings. Regardless of which side you put him on the wing, he's a world-class player. If you want to have him inverted a little bit to the post, okay. But we're a year out from the World Cup, and you're flirting with position changes at the National League level. You're trying to install your beliefs, your philosophy, and we don't really have all that much time until 2026. Like, I would understand if you were starting, at a full cycle where you had 4 years, where you can actually implement some of these type of things with the windows that we have. Like, the only competition between now and then is the Gold Cup, and there's a good chance that a lot of these players are probably not going to be there. And if you saw what U.S. Soccer is saying, that the Gold Cup is going to be primarily of MLS guys, and I hope that's not true, it's going to be even harder. I was hoping that Mauricio Pochettino wouldn't come here and try to reinvent the wheel. Like, you can implement your ideas, your philosophies by keeping the same structure. Like, that's not going to be hard. And you can have expectations and you can have demands. And if certain guys aren't showing them the enthusiasm or the fight or the passion, you can bench guys. That's what you can do. And I think at this point, it would probably make some sense to do that. But when you have a January camp full of MLS guys who play hard for full 90 because they don't take it for granted, and then you have European-based players who just want to go through the motions, yeah, dude, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. It makes it even worse when a guy like Jesse Marsh dunks on you and his Canada team after being, disrespected by the U.S. Soccer Federation. He goes to Canada, and now it's a problem. It's not just Mexico you have to worry about. But I will say this. A national team is not just a combination of 23 of your best European-based players. That's not how it works. You have a domestic league, in this case, Major League Soccer, and you have your European-based players. And the idea is not just to pick your 11 best European-based players. That just does not work that way, because different players have different skill sets that add something different to the national team. Every national World Cup roster that we've had has been a decent blend. I think maybe with the exception of 2014, because guys like Clint, Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, some of these guys were already back in Major League Soccer. We had a couple dual nats. So maybe the 2014 was probably heavier on Major League Soccer, but still played well, played very well. But for the most part, you have your European-based players Your best players generally are going to be in Europe. And then you have your role players who are generally going to be domestically based. And that's fine. What you want to do is you want to see the bulk of your European roster, your European-based player. You don't want to leave any stone unturned. So you're going to see like your European-based player pool A and pool B. You definitely want to see those guys like the Paxton Aronsons of the world. Kevin Paredes, Nokai Banks, Damian Downs, those type of guys. Yeah, you want to see those guys. And you can do it in international windows with friendlies, give them their first caps, 100%. But you also want to see your MLS based player pool as well too. And then when you bring a team together and you announce it, you want to be strategic with both. Because believe it, there are players in Major League Soccer who can be a net positive to the U.S. men's national team. Like, it's not just I want to see, 23 Major League Soccer players playing for the national. That's not it. Like, I recognize that a lot of these guys are doing unbelievable things in Europe, but when you're picking a national team, it's not just, hey, let me get 11 players from Europe because they're playing in Europe. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. That's why you do have a domestic league. And different players bring different skill sets that can be a net positive to the national team. Diego Luna is a very good example of that. Maybe Jack McGlynn has a future, maybe. John Tolkien has a future, maybe. There are guys that can be a net positive. I mean, Zach Steffen right now is playing as the best keeper in the pool. And yet, Matt Turner continues to get picked as the number one. Who's not playing. And that was very, 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 very evident. In that Panama game, that was very evident. That dude was out of place. But a lot of that comes from playing regularly, right? The less you play, the less sharp you are. The less sharp you are, you're going to find yourself out of position more oftentimes than not. But the question really comes to is how much autonomy does Pochettino have picking his rosters? Is there a want of U.S. soccer to see more MLS-based players? I don't know. I'm not there. But I'm not like anti-MLS. Like I recognize the entire player pool, and different guys bring different skill sets that can actually help this national team. 100%. And when I looked at the rosters, it told me two things. It told me, number one, that this was designed to win a trophy. That you're in the Final Four of the Nations League, and you're trying to gain some momentum, which is why you pick the squad that you pick. That's perfectly fine, and I have no problem with that. The second thing is that you keep picking certain players because A, you want this core to play as much as possible, but B, these are some of the guys that you trust. And I think with both of these losses, you learned that there's maybe some guys that you thought you could trust that you can't. It's unfortunate. It just is what it is, which means you have to broaden your horizons. I mean, it sucked that you didn't have Anthony Robinson. Sucks you didn't have Johnny Cardoso, but that doesn't mean that we needed to see Jack McGlynn. Nothing against Jack. I'm a big Jack McGlynn fan, but you know what? There was nothing wrong with bringing in Aiden Morris, excuse me. There was nothing wrong with bringing in Alex Zendejas, who probably would have been a better option for you, if not either of the Aronson brothers. But, listen, I tend to play the long game here, that this is just the Nations League. I would have liked to see more from this team. I would have liked to seen a little bit more heart, a little bit more hustle. And I understand, man, these dudes are playing a different schedule now, more games in their schedule. If you're in England and you're like playing European competition, you have both cup competitions plus the league plus European play. You're playing a lot of games, and so when there's a FIFA window, you probably just want to stay home. I get it. Then stay home. Make up that your hamstring's tight or that your ankle's sore. Do you think this would be probably best if I just stayed back and get this healthy for the next window, or a window that's going to be a little bit more competitive? And you know what? That's fine, because there's going to be guys behind you that really, 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 really want to wear the crest. And for international friendlies, that's cool. Yeah, I tend to agree with Landon that if it's not a priority, then don't accept it. Yeah, I tend to agree with Landon on this one. If you're going to show up and just act like your talent is going to get you over and not play hard, yeah, don't show up. Let somebody else take that spot. That's not going to take it for granted. And to me, it's just like, dude, we're not England. We're not France. We're not Italy. We're not any of those teams. We can't just show up against teams that we think we're better and just expect a roll. That's not how it works. Like, England can do it because they go like 5 deep at every position. Like, they develop the type of talent where they can do that. We're not that. And CONCACAF is not that either. Like, in case these players haven't gotten the memo, CONCACAF is better. CONCACAF is better. Canada is a better team than they were. Mexico, well, I don't know what Mexico really is. Under Aguirre, they're playing a lot better, and Panama is a lot better. That's not how it works in this cutthroat confederation. And I get it, man. You played Panama forever. You probably paid them 25 times over the last 5 years. You know you can beat them if you want. That's the thing. It's like the mentality drives me batshit crazy. Because it has always been our want and our drive to dominate CONCACAF. Any major tournament in this confederation, we win. Or we at least get to a final and we play a good final. Sometimes we get boat raced, whatever, man. Like, I think it was like, the 2011 Gold Cup final at the Rose Bowl. I think we scored the first 2, and then Mexico ended up rolling. I think that was the game that got Bob Bradley fired. There are moments where that's happened, but for the most part, it is our want and our desire to dominate this confederation. And it just seems like they've gotten to this point in their development where it's just kind of like, whatever. Anyway, disappointing to say the least. And by the way, did Pochettino really expect them to respond in a 3rd place game? Like, do you think that their pride really mattered that they beat Canada in a 3rd place game? Come on, man. After they lost to Panama, that's it. They checked out. And I understand the 5 changes against Canada. I probably would have done it too. But after they lose to Panama, man, like, I knew there was going to be an L. After you lose to Panama, I knew there was going to be an L against Canada. But, the thing about it is, before I go, just a quick note to U.S. soccer. Don't allow CONCACAF to do this again. Don't ever allow the U.S. men's national team to play B-side to Mexico, on U.S. territory ever again. If you want to schedule Mexico for 7 o'clock Pacific in LA, do it. Whatever. Then schedule us for 7 o'clock Eastern in the Midwest. Put us in Columbus. Put us in Kansas City or St. Louis. Same night, different time slot. You know what I mean? And just allow us to be able to draw. Because when you have us playing at 4 o'clock in LA, during rush hour, and tickets are like $100 to like at the cheapest tickets like 110. Nobody's going to show up for that. Like the U.S. men's national team is already having a hard time drawing fans as is. Like nobody wants to pay those type of prices to watch this product right now. But you have a better chance of doing it if they're playing in the Midwest. Just thought. That's going to do it for me. Make sure you hit your like and subscribe buttons. Thanks again. You enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a great day.